We're at the Ray Skillman Auto Museum in Greenwood, Indiana. We're out in Indy for the PRI show, and I had to stop by to check out some of the cars. It's been a few years since I've been here, and there's been a lot of new stuff that I'm seeing. One of them is this 1968 Ford Torino, an actual David Pearson raced car. Now, my man Donnie Gardner's here. He runs the place. He knows everything about a lot of the cars here. Even he's a little miffed about this car. We got the little board there that tells us some of the features on this car. I was thrown off by the 396. Now I know it's not a Chevy engine. Pop the hood, it's still an FE, but I wonder if they went in 1968 by cubic inch displacement to weight or something like that.
I'm sure it was probably cubic inch to weight because almost all those cars were all 396 cubic inches, and that would have probably been a D-stroke 427, I would have thought. Big bore, shorter stroke thing.
Yep, it's definitely an FE of some type, and it's got those beautiful Holman Moody valve covers on it. So while these cars still appeared stock, even in 1968, and of course they are called NASCAR stock cars, you look under here and there's still had a lot of modifications even for the day. Fender shape, windshield shape, roof line is all stock, but you look at the way they did the air cleaner and it's sealed to the cowl. I had the opportunity to look at an original race Daytona recently and noticed that it had a dual shock setup that was located about here. Now I see on the Ford, it runs a dual shock setup that's kind of split around the upper A-arm, which is neat. And again, castle nuts, so really stuff for racing with cotter pins, and just looking around, heavy duty radiator. Like I said, this thing has a 396 cube big block Ford. But where today the cars are completely fabricated from scratch, you could see here how they did things up front for the sake of racing. So obviously took the glass out, little catch thing here. I almost wonder if this car was a short track car with the grill like this. It's got a mesh thing here, and you can see how these are, believe it or not, done for aerodynamics. They're trying to smooth everything out even back then. I'm sure teams cheated with the bumpers, shrunk them down and re-chromed them. The number 17, obviously David Pearson in this awesome, awesome blue and gold paint.
Yeah, Ray bought this car from Ray Everham. It was in Ray's museum, and Ray bought several cars from him. And I have not done the history research on the car, but I know Ray's in love with it, so.
So am I.
Yeah, right.
I mean, just walking around the car, little things like obviously the windshield wiper holes are plugged and you have trim hold downs to hold the windshield in. But little things I'm picking up on is on a lot of these cars from the factory, right here, you could see this windshield, the way this piece of trim fits, it's almost sucked down. A lot of them are raised up on a factory or an original car. This almost seems like the detail and the thought process of getting it lowered so the airflow goes over the top. And if I'm looking in here and it's a David Pearson car, I see what I should see, which is
cigarette lighter.
A cigarette lighter. That's too cool. Her shifter, big steering wheel, dry sump tank, and just the crudeness of the roll bar compared to how things are done today with TIG welding and things like that. It's just incredible to look at the history. And earlier Donnie was talking about engine innovation and the early days of Bob Glidden, and how, what would you say, you were like 17 years old and you got an opportunity to hang out with Glidden?
Right. I actually met them the first time right across the street over here at Jerry's restaurant over here. That's the first time that I'd ever met him. And but the innovations and the engine development stuff that was going on back in that time period was absolutely incredible. You sit there and you see it in the NASCAR stuff, how everything has evolved. It's really neat. I love the history. I wish I could just sit there and just do history searches on all of it because it's so interesting. I sat there and he was a very, very successful racer. I mean, history shows that. But the thing that always amazed me was the thought process by what they were doing at that time, how they thought about raising the ports, and you've got certain rules that you go by, and how they could do some of the things they did and still fit in the rules. And it was like those guys, their whole thought process was just on a totally different level than what normal people's thinking was.
Would you consider that time with Glidden the building foundation for your success in pro stock and comp eliminator?
Absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt. Just you always wanted to be like him. You sat there and he was just such a great guy. The whole family, just spectacular, and you know, that's one of the things that drove me, the work ethics that he had. And but the thing that amazed me the most was probably his thought process on how he thought about what he was doing. You know, how to make that extra horsepower.
You know, obviously I'm a huge fan of Bob Glidden, and I respect and I'm a fan of Warren Johnson and the guys who really did everything on the car, not to take away anything from current racers or guys who just drive or just build engines per se, but they had to do everything. They had to get the rig to the track. They had to think about clutch. It wasn't just building the engine. It was, they had to learn, you have to learn how to win. You have to learn how to race, and then you learn how to win. And I was always amazed by racers who win a lot because there's a process to it. And that's something that is trial and error. It's something you first have to lose. Very few racers just show up and win at that level. So in looking back to that time, do you remember anything specific that you may have learned from Glidden or saw him do that really got you to go, wow, this is incredible?
Absolutely. The car was a tool. And every inch of it had to be for one specific purpose. And they didn't. There was not a piece on the car that wasn't redone. Everything from the transmission to the clutch, and every piece was individually tuned. It was incredible, the thought process behind it. I was lucky enough to work with Warren Johnson for a short period of time on an engine development program, and he was the same way. You can see the thought process that those guys had. It's pretty incredible.
Was there any one major thing in regards to the engine that something that a guy like Warren or a guy like Bob Glidden was doing that nobody else was doing?
I think all the guys that were in the engine development stages of that class, they were all on to basically the same thing. Some people did it a little different. The one thing that I did notice was it was always more RPMs. It's like if you had two engines that made the same power, but one run 500 RPMs higher than the other one, that's usually the one that you wanted, because you could use that power more times per minute. And it was Glidden was Bob was running those Hemis, Fords, and just running 95, 9800, 10,000 RPMs way back then, and it was always like an RPM thing, and they were trying to make pieces lighter, and where there was less stress because of lighter components, and really interesting to watch all of it. Absolutely. That I tell the story that I remember going to Gainesville, Florida one year to watch an A Super modified Ford, and Jack Roush was the engine builder on it. Don Bowles was the racer, and they had a 302 Ford, and you had to the engine was, I think, 394 cubic inches, and I thought, how can you get 394 cubic inches out of a stock 302 block? So I went to look to see how do you do this? And when you sit there and you see the engineering of what they did to use that block to make that kind of power, was just the thought process is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, racing back then was a completely different era, and the technology and the thought process. But if it wasn't for those guys, we wouldn't have what we have today. It's just the natural evolution of everything that took place. I mean, even again looking at the roll bar in this car, and the body shape. And even though, I'm guessing that even though this thing looks like a stock body, I'm sure it was tweaked. And again, things like this back here for airflow on the back bumper.
Right.
And the little spoiler on the back, which is just like so tiny, it's almost, you're looking at it going, does this thing even do anything? This wasn't a wind tunnel tested car where they spent millions of dollars looking for arrows. It was track tested.
Right. Yep, learning curves incredible with this stuff.
And a lot of guys talk about these cars and the drivers, and they were fantastic. And we have a relatively modern, by comparison standards, stock car, an Everham car right next to it. And one of the biggest things in stock cars is the tires. They were just so limited by tires back then. I guess you didn't need more grip, because you think, why would they stop here? Why wouldn't they go here? It might have had so much downforce on the back that it just burned the tires off of the thing, where now you have a modern radial like this, and you have a rear spoiler like that.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible how it all has evolved.
Yeah. So there's another video, guys. A look at a David Pearson Torino. Just an incredible piece of history. I can't thank Ray and Donnie and Bill enough for having us in here, checking things out. Appreciate you stopping by the REVan Evan channel. We got so much more coming up. Thanks for watching.